Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome. Hello, hello. It's so great to see all these names pouring into the Zoom room. Hello, welcome. Welcome to the launch event for Glory by NoViolet Bulawayo. We're so excited. If you feel like saying hello, drop a line in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. With these virtual events, it's always really fun to see where everybody is in the world, and in the country, and in the universe. All right, and we'll get started, not to waste any time. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn, New York, and Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley, Massachusetts. I'm Jean from Greenlight, and we're thrilled to host tonight's event with NoViolet Bulawayo launching her new book, Glory. She will be talking with Novuyo Tshuma, so you're in for an excellent time. Hi, Manhattan. Hi, Irvine. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to NoViolet, to Novuyo, to the whole team at Viking, and to our partners at Odyssey Bookshop for making this happen with us, and to all of you for showing up tonight. We're so grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Our co-presenters at Odyssey Bookstore are going to start us off with a greeting and introduction. So over to you, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Jean. Thank you, Greenlight Bookstore, everyone who is able to be here this evening. And of course, thank you to NoViolet and Novuyo to be here as well. It's a pleasure to be joining you this evening around the release of Glory. My name is Jesse Hassinger. I'm the assistant manager and First Editions club coordinator at the Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley, Massachusetts. We have been running our First Editions club since 2001 with monthly selections of titles that we feel are important and lasting works of art. Upon reading Glory this past winter, I immediately knew that it should be included in our First Editions club. Glory is a breathtaking feat of storytelling. The easy comparison is Orwell's Animal Farm, but that is both doing the book a disservice and ignoring a large part of what makes Bulawayo's writing so electric. The central question in the book poses is how does a country who has fought for and won its independence from colonizers become a dictatorship, and where the residents live under an even more strict totalitarian rule? This has been happening time and again throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Indeed, Bulawayo has based much of what happens in this book on the recent history of Zimbabwe. The story is at once all too familiar from modern history as well as it is prescient, proving yet again that world leaders continue to fail to learn from the mistakes of their predecessors, or perhaps learn how to do evil better, depending on what global leader is in question. Beyond the surface political parallels, Bulawayo's writing is an amazing feat of storytelling, not just of telling the story at hand, but of commenting on how stories are told. Each chapter is broken up into smaller accounts that telescope from the universal to the specific with such ease and beauty that the grand metaphors that she writes are so fluid and subtle. It is only after the fact that I realized that the heart of the story of any given chapter was sitting there all along. With all of this in mind, it was an easy decision to have chosen Glory as this month's First Editions Club selection. And we have signed copies of Glory available at the Odyssey Bookshop. And we'll be sharing links for purchase both at the Odyssey and as well at Greenlight in the chat. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And without further ado, let's listen to some beautiful literature.
Thank you so much, Jesse. That was an amazing introduction to the book. And right before we listen to beautiful literature, I just have a few housekeeping notes for everyone tonight. We're all pretty familiar with Zoom, I'm assuming, but in our webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and you can engage with them using the chat function, which many of you have already done. You can find that by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You can post your comments, your thoughts in the chat, which is a great way to show your appreciation for the author and to interact with each other. And if you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A module, which looks like 2 speech balloons. At the end of the evening, Novuyo will be pulling questions from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And as we've mentioned, tonight's featured book is available for sale, both from Greenlight Bookstore and from Odyssey. I'll be posting those links in the chat periodically. Make sure to get your copy. You can order online, or you can also, if you're in Brooklyn, come to our stores in person. And if you're in South Hadley, you can go to Odyssey in store as well. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. And now our interviewer tonight is Novuyo Tshuma. Novuyo is a 2020 Lannan Fiction Fellow and the author of the novel House of Stone, which won the 2019 Edward Stanford Travel Writing Award and the 2019 Bulawayo Arts Award for Outstanding Fiction. Novuyo is a native of Zimbabwe and has lived in South Africa and the USA. Her collection Shadows was published by Kwela in South Africa to critical acclaim and won the 2014 Herman Charles Bosman Prize. She has taught fiction at the Iowa Writers Workshop and now teaches as an assistant professor of fiction at Emerson College in Boston. Novuyo will be speaking with our featured author, NoViolet Bulawayo, the author of We Need New Names, which was a finalist for the Man Booker Prize and which won the PEN Hemingway Award and the LA Times Book Prize for First Fiction, and the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Legacy Award for Fiction and the Etisalat Prize for Literature. NoViolet grew up in Zimbabwe and now lives in California, although I'm not sure how dated that information might be. Bulawayo's new book, you heard all about it from Jesse. So without further ado, I'll let NoViolet take us away with a reading from the book, after which she'll be talking with Novuyo and with all of you. Please take it away, NoViolet and Novuyo.
Thank you, Jean and Jesse, for having us. And thank you, I should say, Dr. Novuyo Tshuma, my friend and sister from Zimbabwe. It's such an honor to be doing this with you, especially considering the journeys traveled. I would cry, but I'm afraid my thing would fall off and it would be a production. Thank you to everyone who has made the time to be with us this evening, and a special shout out to our people from the homeland, Salwonani, Linjani, and I'll just read from the beginning. The section is called Independence. The subsection is called Rally. When at last the father of the nation arrived for the Independence Day celebrations, no earlier than 3:28 in the afternoon, the citizens congregated at the Jidada Square since morning had headed with waiting. They could have raised the whole of Jidada with their frustration alone. That is, if Jidada had been any other place. But the land of farm animals wasn't any other place. It was Jidada. Yes, Toluti Jidada with a da and another da. And just remembering this simple fact was enough to make most of the animals keep their feelings inside like intestines. The fierce sun, said by those who know about things to have been part of His Excellency's cheerleading squad by decree, had been up glaring since mid-morning, doling out such forceful rays fit for a ruler whose reign was nearing all of not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 solid decades. The Jidada party regalia, worn by most of the animals for the occasion, jackets and shirts and skirts and hats and scarves in various colors of the flag of the nation, many of the articles embossed with the face of His Excellency, fed the sun's terrible heat and made the weight even more unbearable. But not all of the animals were going to stand for the torturous weight. Some indeed started to leave, grumbling about having work and things to do, about various places to go to, about the leaders of other lands who arrived at things right on time, like God's infallible machete. These disgruntled animals started as just a smattering: 2 pigs, a cat, and a goose. But the faction very quickly grew to a respectable mass, and emboldened by both their number and the sound of their own voices, the dissidents headed for the exit. At the gate, the group found themselves face to face with the Jidada defenders. Toluti, the dogs, appropriately armed with batons, ropes, gloves, tear gas canisters, shields, guns, and such typical weapons of defending. It was a known fact all over the nation and beyond its borders that Jidada defenders were by nature violent, morbid beasts, but it was especially the presence of the notorious Commander Jambanja, distinguishable in his signature white bandana, that made the dissenters promptly turn around and retrace their steps, miserable tails between the legs. Enter the father of the nation, the ruler whose reign is longer than the 9 lifespans of 100 cats. Also the longest serving leader in a continent of long serving leaders, and indeed in the whole wide world. Now His Excellency's car wove its way through the throngs with the slowness of a hearse, and the animals fell over themselves like intoxicated frogs, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary father of the nation. At this point, the sun, upon seeing arrive the leader who was decreed by God himself to rule and keep ruling, a leader who'd in turn decreed the very sun to head his cheerleading squad, took a deep, deep breath and thoroughly blazed to impress. A select group of dignitaries, all males, most of them old, accompanied His Excellency on hind legs. Accompanying the accompanying dignitaries were decorated defender leaders in military gear, colorful embroidered ropes cinched at the waist, capes pulled low, shiny constellations of medals glinting on solid chests, star insignias bouncing off the shoulders, white gloves on front paws. These were the generals, Toluti, the true linchpin of His Excellency's rule. Throughout the square, animals whipped out their phones and gadgets to take pictures and videos of the procession of power. Behold him. Yes, Toluti, him and only him himself, the anointed one, the only one, the supreme one, the most magnificent one. With the arrival of His Excellency, Jidada Square came alive. Toluti, the father of the nation, had such an aura, his mere presence in any space automatically rearranged the atoms in the air and shifted any given mood, no matter how hostile or dismal or foul, to a positive and electric one. Those who know about things say this quality had especially been a dozenfold more potent a long, long time ago during the first years of His Excellency's rule, when his appearance alone made unripe things instantly ripen to the point of rotting, cured the sick of whatever ailments molested them, turned rocks to mush, deactivated storms and heat waves, rerouted floods, wildfires and plagues of locusts, cured fatal viruses before they even thought of attacking, made dry rivers overflow with water. Yes, Toluti, the father of the nation's appearance alone, had once upon a time started engines, bent steel beams, and in separate documented occasions made scores and scores of virgins pregnant, so that long before he married the donkey and sired children with her, streams of His Excellency's blood were already flowing throughout Jidada. And now, here was the father of the nation lighting up Jidada Square by merely happening, by simply being there. The blaze ignited in flaming applause, and even the animals who not too long before had been trying to leave were now part of the uproar, standing on hind legs and cheering His Excellency, not just with their voices and bodies, no, but also with their hearts and minds and souls. Cows mooed, cats mewed, sheep bleated, bulls bellowed, ducks quacked, donkeys brayed, goats bleated, Horses neighed, pigs grunted, chickens clucked, peacocks screamed, and geese cackled, the cacophony reaching deafening levels as the entourage of power came to a final stop in front of a raised platform. Thank you. Sungabuya Nof.
I sing weed. Toluti nangumin. Oh, NoViolet. First of all, thank you so much for writing this book. You know, we were born under Mugabe, and it was quite surreal what happened in 2017. And so reading this book was a very emotional experience, and a very powerful experience. I do not exaggerate when I say this is the book that we Zimbabwe needed to have written. And in my wildest dreams, this is the book that should be read everywhere in Zimbabwe and everywhere else. It's a beautiful book. It's a dangerous book in the best way. It's really freeing in so many ways. So I thank you so much. Bulawayo, Ejele. So my first question here is, can you please tell us about the life of this book? You know, we read that it started as nonfiction, then slowly moved into this fictional realm with storytelling and animals. How did this come about?
The book came about in November 14, 2017, when, as you know, we woke up to the news that Robert Mugabe had been taken down by his own. I wanted to say by his own dogs, because that's what happens in the book. And I knew right from the get-go that there was a story there that needed telling. I mean, we were on WhatsApp, we were on phones, people were on Twitter, on Facebook. It was such a momentous event. And 2-3 weeks later, I flew into Bulawayo because I could not stay away. I needed to be on the ground. I needed to witness a moment that I never thought I was going to see in my lifetime. I had reconciled myself, especially after seeing people try every possible way they could to be rid of him. I reconciled myself to the fact that he was just going to die in office. So I flew into Zim. Was there. It was such a very complicated moment of euphoria, happiness, excitement. Complicated in the sense that we knew, you know, that in as much as he was out, the person who was coming in was still very much part of Robert Mugabe. But at the same time, there was a sense that, okay, we had seen the West, it could not get any worse. I came back to work, but then the pull of the story happened. And a few months later, I decided to just go and write full time from home. I went there, spent, months researching, being there, was there for the elections, was there for the heartbreaking aftermath. By that time, as you can imagine, Robert Mugabe had become a genre. Everybody and their grandmother and their kids were writing brilliant pieces. A couple of books came out around that time. And as a creative, with my obsession of ownership of the story, I started to realize that, you know what, by the time my book came out, I would have nothing new or exciting to say. And the question became about how to tell a story and still make it new and fresh, and most importantly, my own, a story that was still happening, actually, that was still unfolding. At the time, I noticed that, references to Animal Farm were happening. I think when you grow up in a space like Zim, you learn to find ways to talk about things without talking about things, misdirection of speech. And I actually realized that, you know what, this was actually a good way of telling the story. And one thing led to another. And, my grandmother's animal stories again came up in my imagination. And Hence, glory, as you are reading it, told in animal, in animal voices, was born. But there was also the need to find a way to give myself distance from a story that was unfolding. And I thought use of animal characters was a most brilliant way of doing it. At the same time, as you know, so much upheaval was going on around the world. And the thing is that the story of tyranny is the story of tyranny wherever you go. And I feel like using the artistic choices that I made actually made glory broader than just a Zimbabwean story. It can happen anywhere. So that is the story of the book, how it was born.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's so powerful. This is a story that can happen anyway. As you were talking, I was actually thinking of the New York Times review that came out a few days ago. I think it really had beautiful comparisons for the book, because everyone's talking about Animal Farm, but this is what the reviewer had to say, and I'm reading this. In its depiction of transgenerational trauma, of the lineage haunted, if not extinguished, by the Kukurahundi genocide of the 1980s, the novel bears close literary resemblance to Art Spiegelman's Mos, and that's a book that looks at the Holocaust through a series of letters. Sometimes it feels more like Aesop, sometimes more like BoJack Horseman. So BoJack Horseman is a sitcom that's on Netflix, satire at its best, half horse, half man. And sometimes the sweeping polyphonic nature of the storytelling evokes Fela Kuti's 28-minute-long soundscape of transnational African solidarity and protests. It was so refreshing reading these comparisons, because I think they speak to the scope of this book. It's edgy, it's contemporary, the folklore feels very African, and yet it feels global at the same time. And so, the novel reads like a chorus. We have omniscient narration, first person plural, oral history. It moves. And so I wanted to ask, how did you come up with this chorus? Why this chorus? How did these pieces come together?
The chorus, because I was trying to tell the story of a nation. Mm-hmm. And I thought, in order to do so and do so effectively and truthfully, I needed to have a multiplicity of voices. Mm-hmm. I felt like the traditional narrator was a bit stale. Mm-hmm. For the kind of space I was trying to hold for a population, really, for a country. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, I have tweets. I have a section in tweets. I have these overhead conversations, and the interesting thing is I think actually being home at the time had a lot to do with some of these choices. I mean, you know how life it is at home. It was before COVID, so. For transport, I used to love just getting in a chauffeur, in a public taxi, and sit with strangers and just talk. I love the readiness of my people to just talk. It was also a time when we were queuing for fuel. You just go, wait, and then, however long in, you have made community with people in line, and people are airing their grievances and their hopes and their dreams. So all those things kind of informed the choices. And I was trying to also capture as realistically as I could what it felt to be there among the hecticness of daily life in Zim.
No, I mean, I haven't read anything like this. I think this takes seriously our oral culture, animal folklore. Yeah. I have not seen African folklore written as serious literature this way. And I wanted to read just some of the headlines, just so our viewers get. A leader who thinks he's leading has no power, and has no power is only talking the talk. The Liberator versus Time, a battle of two rulers. The miseducation of a donkey. Will the real father of the nation please stand up? This is very, very hip and very edgy, and I could not stop laughing. I even felt guilty because I was laughing at, allegories of our, leaders of the nation who we have been taught to revere, and we laugh in private. We never laugh in public. It felt almost taboo in a way that was refreshing and joyous. And so I wanted to ask, how was the experience of writing about the seat of power? Dr. Sweet Mother, Dr. Sweet Mother is an allegory of Grace Mugabe, Tuvias, Delight Shasha. And, these names have meanings, Tuvi throughout. Those who understand Ndebele know what Tuvi means.
No, it's Tuvi. I'm not responsible for how you choose to pronounce it.
Tuvi.
Writing, the experience of writing about the seat of power, coming from the space that I was writing from, a space of disappointment, a space of anger. I don't think I've ever been this angry and bearing my pens, I remember the post-election violence of, was it 20, when was that? 2018.
2018, yeah.
And then the riots the following January. I remember at some point, my little nephew was maybe 9 at the time, reacted badly to the tear gas that had been thrown in his yard. And my sister sent me a photograph of this kid, his face just swollen. And I just remember the heartbreak and the anger. And by that time, obviously, we had so much stories of the horror that people were witnessing. But my stance was fueled by that anger, the satire, everything just got amplified for me. I felt like the gloves were off. I felt like I was going to war. I felt like the page was the only weapon I had. And really, what better way of challenging and interrogating tyranny than to reduce it to what it needs, to what it deserves, really. And it's interesting that you say something like, at some point our leaders were revered, and that is a problem with a space like home. And by extension, I think this could be said of African culture in general, in as much as I don't like these sweeping statements. This thing of if somebody's older, they are beyond reproach. You can't question, you can't challenge. So part of this project for me was to actually go against that, knowing that we come from a space where people are reluctant. You don't find people quite free to say anything, to challenge their leaders. And, part of my, I don't know what you call it, part of my task to the next generation of creators is to just keep pushing the envelope in terms of what can be said and how it can be said. And let's see what normalizing that, the process of bringing down the walls around speech does for us. I think that's part of the problem. That's part of why we have the problem of silence when we need to be when we need to be speaking.
Oh wow! This book, it needs to be essential reading for just any generation. As you were talking, I was opening the pages. I was looking for the Martin Luther quote where where Tuvi, who's now the president, is likening himself to Martin Luther with his "I had a dream" speech, and says that Martin Luther came into the future, saw Tuvi's dream. Tuvi dreams about driving fancy cars and wealth. And then Martin based his I have a dream speech on his own dream. So I can't find that, but I found the Siri. I'm just going to read just a paragraph for the Siri, just to show how this work is. It's so amazing. So Tuvi is talking to Siri, right? We all know Siri from the iPhone.
You can say,
"Hey Siri, hey Siri, tell me what do you actually exactly look like? He says, lowering his voice to what he imagines to be more than a friendly whisper. He loosens his tie and leans back in his chair. Tolowuti is thinking of Siri, imagining Siri, wondering about Siri, the shape of her face, her smile, the color of her eyes, her fatness, her gait, the rhythm of her breathing, her smell, the swoosh of her tail. And now that he has done it, asked the question he's always wanted to ask. He feels giddy, like he's just cleared a high fence. And so this speaks to this book it's such a pleasure to read. You're laughing, it's joyful, but at the same time, moments like this with Siri, for me, spoke about the absurdity of language and how that power has rendered language meaningless, even though it's giddy. And throughout, we see that throughout with the seat of power, which I can't imagine was an easy thing to do, dealing with the ways Zimbabwe is. So can you talk maybe a little bit about Dr. Sweet Mother, because she's one of our memorable characters here of Grace. And we see her also dreaming of her own glory as a ticket to power, as glory for her and you know, her dreams for her life. How was it writing this woman? Especially, I'm thinking of Dr. Sweet Mother just opposed with the other females in the work, Destiny, Usmiso, Marvelous, Sisters of the Disappeared. These women have such emotive and social power in this book. They propel the novel.
Absolutely. And most importantly, they are aligned with vulnerable citizens.
Mm-hmm.
They are aligned with the resistance, with the cause for justice.
Mm-hmm.
And that cannot be said, unfortunately, of Sweet Mother, who is aligned really up until her fall with the power. And we really don't get to see her engaged in any meaningful friendships or connections with other females in the text, which is the strength, I think, that we see with the females of Lozike. They live in a township called Lozike, and there's such strong solidarity, there's sisterhood, there's community around these women, and they're able to feed off of each other's energies in ways that Dr. Mother, whose companions really are male, whose companions are violent, and whose companions eventually and understandably turn against her, because she, as a woman, she's an outsider. And as an ambitious woman, never mind, that doesn't make her special. They are ambitious males in that camp. But the fact that she actually dares to imagine herself taking over the old horse means that she is becoming subversive and problematic, hence the violence that she is dealt with, you know, after the downfall. The experience of writing her was challenging in the sense that she really is the odd one out in a text where we see women come together to be part of these moments of resistance, and they really play a very crucial role in moving the data to a future that is hopeful at the end of the novel. But I thought it was necessary to do so because, well, you can't save all your characters, and two, she was inspired by a character who was pretty much along those lines. And in thinking about what literature does for us, among other things, is supposed to educate us and have us talking. I think she is a good opportunity to have us talk about the kind of spaces we occupy, not just as women, but as citizens of a country. Who are we? Why are we where we are? What do our camps look like? So I'd be interested in the kind of conversations that she inspires.
You know, speaking of the spaces, of the liberatory spaces in this book, I was moved and amazed by how you handled Kukura Wundi yeah, and how it leads to redemption. Despite the horrors, around the massacre that happened in Mashonaland and Matabeleland in the 80s at the hands of government agents, government soldiers, there is a powerful passage here that starts at the bottom of page 233 that about tears and the power of naming names. These characters name themselves and their lineages, and that power of family and knowledge of histories. Even as these characters are being brutalized, there's that redemption. That interiority, it's like a communal mourning that we couldn't get anywhere except through a book that is bringing the collective voice. And I'm thinking of how that fuels destiny at the end. Destiny becomes this, from a character who's come back home from overseas and is broken and has so many questions and so many histories and there's so much that is going on, to someone who leads actually Jijada's revolution. And this is where this book becomes liberatory. It is not only talking about what has happened, it has got velocity. It's talking about how things can be, or what it is that small people or citizens who feel helpless, the ways in which they can bring about change. So can you talk about that a little bit?
And
I just want to say, I think this is what makes this book different from many books that have come out in the contemporary Zimbabwean landscape. It's helping us think through not only who we are, but how we can move beyond.
Yeah, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm writing Gukuraundi after you wrote Gukuraundi in the Amazing House of Stone, and so did Sipiwe, Gloria and Job, and Theory of Light. And this is to say we are all in conversation, and it's really a beautiful thing to be among this community of writers, and writing for some of us a very painful chapter that I don't think we have even started to scratch the surface off. So I just wanted to thank you for the work that you did to open doors for me to come in and do the work that I did. Hopefully I'm opening doors for the next writers. But yes, that specific way of handling it was important to me because it is an unattended wound that is festering, and that is not going to go away. The pain is not going to go away. But I was thinking of what healing could potentially look like, what that closure would look like, the naming of the dead, the wall of the dead, people writing their names, the acknowledgement. It felt necessary to me because I know that is part of what people are craving for. Of course, victims have their own stories and their own demands and their own ways of going about it. But for me, that was at least a start.
No, thank you so much, NoViolet. I have many more questions, but I have to open it up to our viewers. So I'm going to go down and ask some of these questions. And so here's one from PY. To what extent did you dig into Zimbabwe's history to bring Glory alive, and how did you pen the characters and the setting? So to what extent did you dig into Zimbabwe's history to bring Glory alive? And that's an interesting question because the history is alive in this book. It's not static. It lives in the bodies and the bones of the characters, which is powerful.
To a larger extent, actually, when in A-level history, where the teacher would laugh. That was his phrase, to a larger extent. Yeah, definitely. You're right. History is alive. And part of it is that, our present is also history. Our future is history. And, there's the past, there's the past history, the recent history. So I tried to go back to to acknowledge those histories. And part of why that was important, for me was the recognition that, we are in a mess that is largely because of our failure to learn from history. If circle is a word, to kind of circle that history. So history is very much active and front and center of this story. And the ending too, people only get to that ending because they are able to go back and deal with their history.
Oh, thank you, NoViolet. So here's another question here from Fungai Teach. It says, in what ways did the story surprise you as it unfolded?
In what ways? I remember a character like Destiny surprised me because the book started with the seat of power as the center, but down the road I realized that, it needed to be about the citizens. It needed to be about common people. The seat of power story was not worth telling, at least in the ways that I centered it. So it surprised me in the sense that, and I think most creatives would agree, that sometimes the story will tell you where it wants to go and how it needs to be told. And then Destiny further went on to surprise me by what happens to her happened to her. I won't give the book away. For me, that was a bit that took me off guard, because it was a moment where I felt like, okay, something is really shifting even in me as an artist, because I feel like a lesser writer, me being that lesser writer before whatever happened to me, would have gone the obvious route. So it was an interesting moment where the story wanted to live its own life, and I had no choice but to allow it to. That's just one of those moments, yeah.
Oh wow, that's also Destiny's path in the novel in a way. There's a part where when she has dealt with the things she needs to deal with, she says, sometimes stories will raise the dead as if they are not dead at all, but alive in our mouths, only waiting to be animated by the tongue. And that's a really powerful, I think, metaphor in the story. I mean, Destiny, I think, makes the story, but let me not give away too much for our viewers. Because it's scary to read this. It was scary to read this. For me, it was scary because it's close to us, but it's allegory. But you feel the terror, even as we laugh. And I could not have seen a way out. And this book gives us that pattern, those stories, ways to think about how we can find a way out. It was a very emotional end. I did not expect that from the Book of Folklore. One thing as Zimbabweans, we do like, I think, to laugh a lot at ourselves as Africans, not to take ourselves seriously. So what I did want to again ask before I just one question I'm planning to ask is why glory for this? This is a book that is why glory for this book? What is glory in the Jijada?
You mean the title?
Yes.
No, I'm not answering that question.
Aibo.
No, we'll leave that question alone.
I should leave that question alone.
No, we will leave. Yeah, we're leaving it alone. Yes. That's my mystery. That's my mystery.
Oh.
Yes.
All right. No, I will try and press it another time. All right. Let me come back here. Oh, beautiful question from you. Yeah, there's a beautiful question for a perfect question. Now I'm going to try and research. Now I'm interested. Okay, here's a great question from UVet. How much did Inganegwane, so Inganegwane are fairy tales, folklore, influence the way you told this necessary and important story of Zimbabwe's history and present?
Hi, Vetinlo. We're waiting for your book. So thank you for writing, and the bookshelf is there with your name on it. So how much do you think Ngane want? Quite a whole lot. You know, I've said everywhere that I was raised on my grandmother's stories. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those kids who was read to. Every night, you know, we didn't have books around. That really was just specific to my case. I'm sure I have friends who were lucky to have people buying books and reading to them. But for me, my grandmother was the book, the living book. And I don't think I'd trade it for anything, especially seeing how very formative that experience was to my own sense of voice, because I learned so much from this woman who told stories, things like voice, things like character, things like dialogue. Really, it's just amazing how I'm always going back to that childhood to benefit really from what was a church, a school, even though I didn't really realize at that moment. So I'd say a lot. And going back made it easy. I know that they are probably would be the heavy comparisons to Animal Farm, but I feel like her storyscape was richer, was complicated in ways that I hope actually saves glory than, you know, it's comparison.
By far. This book, I think, inspires me to taking Ganegwane seriously as literature. This is a lesson in craft.
Absolutely.
The right here, serious, no games. Okay, so here's another question from Uchipo Dendere. So even some of the people want to know why glory, but we'll leave that for the author, viewers.
No, Uchipo Dendere will tell us why glory.
So Uchipo says, Uchipo Dendere says, I loved your comment in the Times interview that freedom begins when we can dream. I would love to hear about your Zimbabwean dream or dreams for the children of the characters. My copy is yet to arrive.
My dream is that, you know, they live in a free Zimbabwe. That has been I think that's a big part of why I wrote Glory. It was fueled by the belief that a better Zimbabwe is possible. But it has to start with us seeing and imagining it. I remember in 2018, I was in Botswana, in the neighboring country of Botswana, shopping for groceries, which is what people living near border towns would do because it's better for their pockets. And I met this woman who had read We Need No Names. She was a friend of my cousin. And I think when my cousin introduced us, she said something very touching to me. She said, I was partly born, and you know, something will give. It translates to, please write us too, so that we can see ourselves. Maybe something will click. I'm paraphrasing, and I was really humbled and touched by a recognition that there was a space for fiction, a space for art in our reality and potentially in our future. So my dream for Zimbabwe really is within these 416 pages. I don't know if it's this current Zimbabwe that I'm writing to or if it's a future Zimbabwe, but it is my hope that at some point I will have readers. You called it a dangerous book. I hope that I will have readers who will read dangerously. And that danger, that element of danger will take us somewhere better.
Oh, wow, powerful. Thank you, Pat. So there's one question here from Ubuyegile Dube. It says you've written, an important work. It speaks of several different dark times in our nation's history, Kuraundi probably being the most notable. while witnessing the banning of books and teaching history in schools in the United States, with the banning of critical race theory teaching, how has your literature been received in Zimbabwe, in particular in the schools? Then that makes me scared. This book, please, hey, yeah, okay, over to you, NoViolet.
Well, I know that, well, it's too early to tell how Glory is going to be received. But I know that Names was not embraced for the school to be taught in schools. And I was, I was told that it wasn't, it was not the text that they were looking for. But that said, I think universities do teach it. So it's the high school curriculum that it failed to qualify for. I don't know what our young people are supposed to be reading or not reading, but it's definitely not We Need New Names. But I'm glad that at universities it's being read, and I'm really grateful to Zimbabwean educators who are consciously making the choice to to teach our books. It's really great. Yeah.
Oh, so thank you for that. And I wanted to ask, how are you? Are you nervous about this book coming out in Zimbabwe? I don't know if that's a fair question.
Why should I be nervous?
That's not a fair question.
Why should I be nervous? No, I'm not nervous.
You're not nervous. I'm nervous for you, in the best possible way.
I'm good. I'm good.
Oh my God, someone has just asked that question. To what extent do you think Glory would affect your safety as a writer living in Zimbabwe? This is from Ubuhle Dube.
I really have no idea. I think I'll cross the bridge when I get to it. But I'm glad it's not the kind of question that I had to consider when I was writing the book. It was not an option, It felt like a time to create, coming back to create dangerously. And I think that's my challenge to creatives, both at home and outside. Do not let anything stand in the way of your truth telling in your stories. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Because our fear will not liberate us, it will not protect us, it will not save us.
Oh wow, that is so powerful. I felt that edge, that energy that you're talking about, that truth. This is a book that is just, I feel like it's hopelessly true. It cannot help but speak its truth, and you feel it, and it becomes undeniable. And it's amazing that it does that for all the characters, including the father of the nation, who is Mugabe. I almost cried in the part where the father of the nation walks the streets of his city and does not recognize, seems out of touch with reality. And that is one of the most powerful depictions for an allegory of what has been happening to us, I think, and to our leaders that I've seen anyway. I think we may have time just for one more question. Let's see, just one more, and then we are going to have to go.
Wow, that went fast.
It did, don't you? Okay, here's an interesting one about craft.
Okay.
This is from Zvede. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Zvede. From a writing perspective, what was your process of actually writing the novel? Yes, what was the actual process?
The actual process. So my process starts in this big head right here. In the sense that my before I write, I have to try and tell myself the story. I think that could be an orature thing as well, that I need to try and get the story in the head, and then I move on to the notebook. The notebook is very important because a lot of thinking editing happens as I'm writing. I think it took me about a year to write the full draft and send it to my amazing team of my agent, my editors. And then from there, it was a multiple round of drafts. But I tend to revise a lot obsessively, even as I'm waiting for comments back. I just don't sit there and wait. The lesson, it's a teacher lesson. I'm going to be a teacher now I know we have upcoming writers on the panel, for instance, that I don't just sit and wait, for feedback. Try and learn to critique your own stuff, try and learn to be your own reader. I think it's in those moments that you are pushed to clarify the story for yourself. And I think, I found that I was always a step ahead when my feedback came back, because some of the things I would have thought about them and even figured them out. So that was the process. But I'd say that Glory was the hardest thing I've really ever done. It demanded a lot. And it demanded a lot of my imagination, a lot of growth as an artist. But I think that's part of the beauty of the journey.
Thank you so much, NoViolet, for writing this, for the power of your pen, for the gift of your words and your knowledge. There's also love in this book. There's just so much redemption here. And that you're able to write all these worlds in this one book. This is the hopeful. This is my book, my Zimbabwe book. This is the book we needed and we did not know. Bulawayo Echele. Thank you. Thank you, viewers, for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. It's such a gift to be here, sharing the book with you.
Thank you all for that incredible conversation. That was so wonderful. Thank you all in the audience for your excellent questions and for engaging with us tonight. I'm so excited to dive into this one and wish you all the best of luck with your book tour, NoViolet. Thank you so much, Novuyo, for being such a sage and witty interviewer.
And amazing,
amazing, really wonderful.
Thank you. No, you're amazing. You're brilliant. Thank you.
Truly. Thank you all so much. Make sure to get your copy of Glory from Greenlight Bookstore or from Odyssey Bookshop. Thank you all once again, and have a wonderful evening or morning or day, whatever it is for you, wherever you are in the world.
All right.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
So
let's ham.
Yes,
All right.
Okay, Shab.